There is a lot to say about Ghost in the Shell. The series introduced and in some ways redefined cyberpunk as a genre. Very few anime have matched its cyberpunk quality, the only lower point being Arise, which fell short of standing up to the quality of the rest of the series, but it could still be an enjoyable movie. Like any other successful franchise, you have adaptations to alternate forms of media. And in early 2017, Ghost in the Shell had a Western live-action film. It had a strong visual flair and was pretty solid overall, but fell apart towards the end, sinking into the depths of cliché. However, while the movies are overall enjoyable, the games haven't fared as well. Mediocre at best, the games hardly even adapt a license as well as any fan would hope. Ghost in the Shell for PS1 was an adaptation of the movie, but it was just a Tachikoma arcade game. Based on Standalone Complex was a PS2 release that came really close but fell short due to glitches, terrible frame rate, and overall jarring design decisions. And then there was an FPS for the PSP that was ambitious but still fell short. It has been over a decade since we even had a Ghost in the Shell game, so in comes Nexon and Neeple, Nexon being behind countless infamous free-to-play games like MapleStory, Combat Arms, and Counter-Strike Nexon Zombies. The game was announced to be Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex First Assault Online. Really? And speaking of unnecessary, the game being a free-to-play first-person shooter by Nexon! But I digress. Today we're going to be looking at the game from a design standpoint. I started playing the game when it was shutting down, and the devs reduced the price of all game items to just 1 GP, so I can't criticize the business model. The game has been shut down as of recording this video, so I don't imagine anyone would spend money on this game anyway. We're looking at whether the game deserved the given lethal injection. Ghost in the Shell is known for its beautiful art direction and phenomenal cinematography. So why is it that every game released under this franchise have to have boring environments and visuals in every installment? Okay, I don't dislike brown and gray color palettes. If it's appropriate for the tone, then it can have subtle color grading. The brown and gray cities, factories, and slums don't even attempt to adapt the beauty of Ghost in the Shell's cyberpunk aesthetic. Let's take a look at a scene from the original movie. Now the game. Now let's look at a clip from the live-action movie. And now the game. There are only a couple maps that barely render a cyberpunk feel, but the overall art design is seriously lacking. Being the fourth game in a row to do this isn't really surprising, but it's still an annoyance that has to be addressed. Decent character models and great weapon design are the only aspects you're going to see that matches Ghost in the Shell's visual fidelity. Most of the character models and skins are adapted straight from the anime, whilst taking some creative liberties on extra cosmetics and new characters. The weapons aren't something we haven't seen before, but they have been retouched with a futuristic aesthetic. It makes the guns look fresh, while technically being a copy and paste of what we've seen many times before. The M4 that we see as a starter weapon in every free-to-play game looks really pleasing along with the rest of the weapon roster. The series doesn't have too many weapons, but most of the weapons by designer Masamune Shido are portrayed here. From the iconic C-26A submachine gun to Togusa's Mataba 6 Unica auto revolver. The guns sound fucking great. They're loud, beefy, and echo through the environment and make for orgasmic firefights. rest of the sound design doesn't hold up. The voice actors from Standalone Complex reprise their roles here, and they do a good job. It's the way they implement their voices in the game that fails. The characters only speak one line per action. Take Major Kusanagi for example. You use her ability, she says,
Thermoptic ammo up and going in.
And when you sync up with other characters, she says,
Skill sync initiated, link up.
Even in the main menu, she only says,
Activate cyber range firewalls and prepare to engage.
When you're playing a game that almost requires you to pay attention to callouts from teammates, it's kind of a requirement to have a little bit of variety in each line. It just gets a little bit ear-grating when you have to hear over and over in such a short amount of time. This underutilization of the cast only hurts the fact that it's using the Ghost in the Shell license even more. And that's not even mentioning the music, which only uses one of the many iconic tracks of the series in the startup screens. Music in the actual game is few and far between, as well as average and forgettable. I appreciate the use of synth when a round starts, but that just isn't enough when you have a series with such unforgettable music. Now, a lot of Ghost in the Shell fans will get on me for saying this, but I don't really care how the game uses its license. I don't care how any game uses its license, as long as the gameplay itself, from a mechanical standpoint, is solid. Which, I have to admit, isn't entirely a lost cause. The gunplay in First Assault at face value seems like your average modern FPS, but has a bit more depth than you think. Recoil and spread, varying on a class, can take some getting used to. Assault rifles and light machine guns typically jump around and have wide spread patterns that can only be alleviated by crouching and tap fire. Longer range and even medium range control can be very unforgiving, and there is heavy RNG recoil. So what does this all mean? Well, it means you're gonna have a hard fucking time aiming, but that's not entirely a bad thing. For a game that's mostly derivative, it's nice to have some skill curve to it. It's just that there are some contradicting factors that kind of make it less skill-based than it may seem. Body shots can take anywhere from 5 to 10 shots for automatics, but a headshot is always going to be a one-shot kill. So this can throw all skillful aiming out the window when somebody simply gets a lucky headshot. And technically in any game you could get a lucky headshot, but in this game it feels more likely because of the first shot being 100% accurate, the limited mobility, and the RNG spread. If you've been looking at the gameplay, you could probably see me hitting some headshots when I wasn't even aiming for them. But again, there is a lot of recoil and spread, meaning what I'm talking about mostly applies to short and medium range encounters. Long range encounters, good luck trying to hit anything, unless you have a sniper rifle. In that regard, and in most encounters, you'll find that any weapon can be viable. Except for shotguns. Shotguns are just awful.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer? Every night, I can feel my leg, and my arm, even my fingers. The body I've lost. The comrades I've lost. Won't stop hurting. It's like they're all still there. You feel it too, don't don't you? I'm gonna make him give back our past.
And due to the level design, which is kind of derivative, it often turns firefights into area control, where due to lack of health regeneration, yes, I said lack of health regeneration, will often have players watch possible openings, keeping enemies suppressed. And that is not a bad thing. It makes matches a lot more stress-inducing, especially in the demolition mode where you only have one life. Something so standard in FPS nowadays, I wasn't expecting a Korean free-to-play shooter to not follow that formula of regenerating health. But there is a way to heal, and there's only one way to do so, and that's by using one of the character's skills. So my cynical ass is probably making you think the game doesn't have much going for it. But what gives it a hint of potential is its character abilities and a unique skill sync mechanic. You have many characters from the show to select, as well as the new, obviously new original characters for the game, and they kinda look out of place. So you have your standard class system ranging from heavier classes to weaker, faster classes. They have corresponding weapons that balance their roles, and they have your standard hero shooter-esque abilities. Yada yada yada, been there, done that. For example, Major has her cloak ability, Bato has his rocket arm, Togusa has an exploding seeker drone. And these are all obtained slowly through time and faster through kills, but there are two tiers for the skills. Tier 1 is usually a weaker, less effective version of the same skill, but is immediately usable. Tier 2 is where things get interesting. Not only are the skills way more effective, but here's where the skill sync mechanic comes in. Skill sync is when someone uses a Tier 2 skill and shares the skill with up to 3 teammates. For instance, Major uses her Tier 2 thermal optic camo, and her teammates in the vicinity also use it with a simple press of a button. Skill syncing is also stackable, meaning you and your teammates can sync cloak, speed boost, and health buff together and overwhelm the enemy team through a tough squad of blitzkrieg ninjas. And it's when this teamwork comes into play that truly makes the game's potential shine. It is undoubtedly what holds this game from being a completely forgettable experience. Which is why it's a shame, however, that not all abilities are balanced. Some can be completely useless while others seem absolutely necessary. There's Paz's Hyper Sprint. You move faster, which only has use when you sync it with others, combining Hyper Sprint with other abilities to set up an ambush before the enemy does. So it's in that case that his Hyper Sprint ability can easily win around for your team, if you communicate well. Major's thermal optic camo can be pretty, useless. If you have a good display and functioning eyes, you'll be able to spot her no problem. And obviously there's also stuff like Togusa's Seeker Drone and Bato's Rocket Arm for a cheap kill or two. As previously mentioned, Borma's Nanogel armor is the only way to ever heal your character in this game, with this Tier 1 being an instant heal, and Tier 2 giving him a health buff and to any teammates that sync up. This makes it the utmost valuable ability in the game, especially in the one life mode demolition. No, seriously, you can cheat death along with your teammates and steamroll the enemy in a counterattack. As for game modes, there are 3 of them. The first 2 are your standard team deathmatch and demolition modes, and the third being Terminal Conquest, which is a tug-of-war style mode that has one team capturing and the other defending. Yeah, it's not like you haven't seen this before, but this mode has the Tachikomas. However, they haven't been implemented in the best way. I don't even know how to obtain them, but all I know is that they're essentially tanks that absorb and deal a lot of damage. They're more of a nuisance than anything else, and you don't even see them much to begin with, since they're gone after only a minute. A lot of the time, they're not even around for 20 seconds, I'm serious, look at this clip.
The enemy think tank to make it vulnerable to attacks.
They're AI controlled, meaning you're not gonna get to pilot them. You can either stand near them and not get hit, or you can just shoot them and eventually they'll blow up. This feature was kind of meh. Hell, you can even customize them, but there's only one other set of armor you can even put on it. There is one aspect of the customization that shines though, and that's the gun customization, where you can truly personalize your guns with attachments on your muzzle, barrel, different sights, magazines, and paint jobs. The attachments can quite drastically affect the performance of your gun. This game has an interesting three-ranged system: effective, optimal, and extreme, affecting your weapon's damage and ultimately dictating the gun's optimal range. For instance, your weapon will actually do bonus amounts of damage when shooting from, let's say, a submachine gun at medium range. It all depends on your customization. This customization that doesn't only add bonuses and balances out each attachment is something that is meaningful and what I want to see more in FPS. Out of all the customization options, this is the only one that truly stands out, but it's not enough to shake off the feeling of the game's shallow nature. Quite simply, this game never left the beta phase. From the everlasting netcode issues to the lack of worthwhile additional content, the game suffers from mismanagement issues. Despite the community endlessly requesting fixes to these problems, Nexon only responded by the inclusion of loot boxes with additional cosmetics. Wow, haven't heard of that one before. And for those who even heard about the game during its marketing, would know that the game doesn't even look as polished as the trailer seemed. There were a lot of cool things that were going to be added to the game post-launch, like Tachikoma PvE, that never saw the light of day. And for those who actually stuck around after the game got its renewal update, the last patch ever applied to the game before it shut down, have told me that the game was problematic since day one, obviously, and that they never fixed them. Instead, there was the renewal update, which essentially turned the game into the class-based system we see now, where rather than using any character and having the same amount of health, speed, and being able to use every weapon, was changed in favor of a class-based system. This made a lot of the fans that did stick around leave because they weren't a fan of the new system. Its main problem is that it has unique ideas, but it doesn't take risks with them. The skill sync system and the character abilities all have potential to truly stand out, but plays it safe and ends up feeling like a bunch of other games in its genre. No game deserves to die though. In fact, I'm a fan of what they did with the renewal update. Changing it into a more class-based system at least makes it stand out from other shooters a little bit. I just wish they updated the game and kept it alive and made it into something great. Unfortunately, that wasn't in their best interest from a financial standpoint. So did you miss out on Ghost in the Shell standalone complex First Assault Online? Unfortunately, not much you couldn't find elsewhere.
Oh.